If archaeologists could easily explain the many and varied things that they pull out of the ground or discover elsewhere, archaeology would be one of the world's easiest professions. Anyone would be able to do it. That's not the way things work, though. The truth is that archaeologists are often baffled by the things they find, and they were especially baffled by the things you're about to see in this video. When did human beings, or more specifically, hominins, first start cooking their food? The answer to that question might be earlier than anyone imagined until recently. In November 2022, scientists confirmed the discovery of fish fossils found at a site close to the Jordan River, which shows signs of having been cooked before the fish was eaten. If they're right, it's a major historical breakthrough, because the fish would have been cooked about 780,000 years ago. Until this claim was made, there was no evidence of Neanderthals or early humans cooking their food until around 170,000 years ago. The site the fish were found at is called Gesher Beno Ta'akov, and the claim isn't based on one or two examples. Irit Zohar, the archaeologist who makes the claim, has cataloged thousands of fish remains at the site and found strong evidence of cooking in several thousand instances. The clue is that there are a lot of fish teeth, but no fish bones. Fish bones soften or disintegrate when cooked at high temperatures, but their teeth remain. There are burnt flints elsewhere in the same area, indicating a fireplace was built. You might have heard of the ancient medical practice of trepanning, which was a way of relieving pressure on the brain by literally drilling into or cutting holes in the skull. In November 2022, archaeologists in Turkey's Van province were surprised to find a trepanned skull. It's not so much the fact that the skull was trepanned that surprised them, as the fact that the skull is 3,200 years old. We know that this part of Anatolia was settled during the Neolithic eras, and that the people who lived here were relatively advanced for their period, but we never previously suspected that they were capable of this. Based on the fact that there are signs of healing around the edge of the bone, scientists think that the skull's owner survived their trepanning. That was far from a given. Historians think that trepanning was only carried out in the direst of circumstances, but ancient physicians believed that it could treat head injuries, headaches, and even infestation by evil spirits. We'll never know why the recipient of this trepanning underwent the process, but at least it seems they lived to tell the tale. We all know what a Swiss Army knife looks like, and it doesn't look like this, but this might have been the equivalent of a Swiss Army knife 65,000 years ago. This stone tool is one of many similar tools that were found in the south of Africa in mid-2022. It's not only typical of South Africa, though. You'll find ancient tools that look like this in museums all over the world. To many historians and scholars, the similarities between the tools are significant. It's apparent just from looking at them that they were all made according to the same template, even in cases where the tools were made and found thousands of miles apart. That indicates that the design for the tool traveled thousands of miles, crossing borders and even seas as it did so. There's no suggestion that the people who lived in Africa 65,000 years ago transmitted the template in person. Instead, it's likely they explained it to someone, who explained it to someone else, who explained it to someone else, and so on. If you look at it that way, it's evidence of a social network existing across the Earth during prehistory. About 1,200 years ago, a Viking sword was broken into 3 pieces. In June 2022, the pieces of the rare sword were finally reunited. The reunification of the sword is made all the more amazing that the pieces of it weren't even discovered at the same time. The first was found by an amateur metal detectorist scouring Stavanger on the west coast of Norway in 2021. The second and third were found by another metal detectorist on nearby farmland in spring 2022. After putting the pieces back together, historians have been able to identify the Viking sword as a type that was popularly used for several centuries in France, Britain, and Ireland, but originally came from the UK. It's impressive that they've been able to reach that conclusion despite the most important part of the sword, by which we mean the blade, still being missing. There's enough left of the hilt for the academics to be able to study its decorative patterns, intricate carvings, and silver and gold details. By doing so, they can say with confidence that it was forged in either England or the Frankish Empire, somewhere close to the start of the 9th century. Our next discovery comes from June 2022, and it's a big one. In fact, it's a whole forgotten city. The 3,400-year-old city has recently emerged from the Tigris River, having been submerged during the construction of Iraq's Mosul reservoir during the 1980s. Somehow, the existence of the city was either unidentified or ignored when the reservoir was made. Archaeologists say that the city was built during the height of the old Mitanni Empire. It wasn't any old city either. It was a place of great importance. We know that because it has several large administrative buildings and a grand palace. Some historians think it might even be the ancient and fabled city of Zakiku, which is known to have been one of the most important cities in the entire empire between the years 1550 and 1350 BCE. The city will only remain accessible for as long as the current drought lasts, which means the experts at the scene have to work fast. So far, they've mapped all of the city's largest areas and identified a fortified wall punctuated with towers, vast storage facilities, and what might be an industrial complex. They've also found 5 ceramic vessels containing more than 100 cuneiform tablets, but translating the text is likely to take a long time. The mountains of Oppland in Norway are melting, and as they do, they're giving up objects that have been covered in snow and ice for centuries. In April 2022, archaeologists scouring the mountains came across a perfectly preserved Iron Age sandal on what's left of the Horse Ice Patch. It was found with an as-yet unidentified fragment of another textile, arrow shafts, lead fodder, and ancient horse dung. It's highly likely that this part of the ice patch was a mountain pass during the Iron Age. That theory has been all but confirmed by the discovery of several stone cairns along what would have been the optimum route through the mountains. The shoe is the most personal of the items recovered from the region so far, and was likely made somewhere between the 2nd and 5th centuries. Experts say the footwear is of the Karabatina type, made from a single piece of leather laced through hoops positioned over the bridge of the foot. What's odd is that it was recovered from a height of more than 6,000 feet above sea level, in a place that would have been covered in ice even back then. Who on earth thought that shoes like this one were appropriate footwear for traversing glaciers? If you thought that the hand grenade was an invention of the First or Second World War, we have news for you. To discover the origin of the hand grenade, you have to go a lot further back than the 20th century. Try the 7th century instead, which is when Greek fire was used on the enemies of the Byzantine Empire. This ancient hand grenade isn't from the 7th century, it's from the 14th, but we've chosen it because it looks so much like the devices that are used in modern times. The clay grenade is acorn-shaped, and even has a hole at the top for a fuse to be inserted. It would have been filled to the top with a flammable liquid, and then hurled at enemy ships to cause as much damage as possible. This particular example was found off the coast of Israel in 2016, and is thought to be a leftover from the Crusades. The flammable liquid inside it was probably alcohol, so it wouldn't have been as destructive as the grenades of today, but it would still pose a huge risk to a wooden boat. When mummy discoveries happen, they're usually happening in Egypt. Mummy discoveries in Peru are rarer, but not unheard of. Mummy discoveries in Peru that come in bundles, though, are practically unheard of. In May 2018, a research team in Lima, Peru found a 1,000-year-old mummy bundle in what was described as near-perfect condition. The discovery took place in the already well-established archaeological site of Pachacamac. It's a near-miraculous find because Pachacamac was so extensively looted by raiders during times of antiquity. We don't even know the name of the culture that these mummies belonged to. All we can say for sure is that they came before the Inca. They wrapped their dead up in bundles like this, usually including not only the remains of the deceased, but a collection of grave goods contained within layers of elaborate wrapping. It was initially hoped that the age, gender, health, and perhaps even the cause of death of this individual would be possible to ascertain, but that turned out to be too much to ask for. It's well preserved, but not immaculate. The Nazca Desert of Peru is already famous for the existence of the Nazca lines, ancient etchings made on the desert floor by unknown hands thousands of years ago. Now it appears that the lines aren't the only form of desert artwork in Nazca. Using drone technology to photograph the desert from new angles, archaeologists have identified a further 50 shapes and drawings spread across the Palpa province. These new drawings, some of which have been described as humanoid monster-like figures, are more weathered than the Nazca lines to the extent that they're almost invisible to the naked eye in some cases. Were it not for advances in technology, we wouldn't be able to see them at all. Because of the degree of weathering, archaeologists don't think they were created by the Nazca culture. Instead, they think it's more likely that the shapes were carved by the Topara and Paracas cultures who lived here 2,500 years ago. Very little is known about the Topara people, and how, if at all, they're connected to the Paracas and the Nazca. Perhaps these newly discovered glyphs will provide us with more information. We're moving on to the creations of the ancient Romans now, and more specifically, the question of how they kept their beer cold. In mid-2018, Swiss archaeologists completed a months-long study at the Roman site of Augusta Raurica in their home country. They wanted to understand the purpose of several mysterious underground shafts that the Romans created there. Their experiments proved that beer could be kept cold on ice at the bottom of the 16-foot deep shafts for up to 3 months at a time, thus supporting the idea that they were used as refrigerators. The experts now believe that the Romans would place anything they wanted to keep cool at the bottom of the shafts, pack them full of compacted snow ice, and then cover them with straw to insulate the snow. Beer would have been one of the things they kept in their refrigerators, but it's also likely that they used them to keep wine, cheese, and oysters cool during the summer months. Of course, just because the shaft can be used as a refrigerator doesn't mean that's definitely what the Romans used them for, but neither archaeologists nor scientists have any better ideas. You've probably heard it said that the taste of wine improves with age. So, with that in mind, how would you feel about trying this ancient Chinese liquor? It is theoretically safe to drink, but it's spent the last 2,200 years inside a sealed bronze kettle inside a Qin dynasty tomb. The tomb is one of many that were discovered in China's Shanxi province in March 2018, and was probably occupied by a commoner, rather than someone of notable social standing. Being a commoner didn't mean that you were sent to your eternal rest without a few grave offerings, though. This liquor was probably something that the tomb's occupant was very fond of back when they were alive. The experts who opened the kettle described the alcohol as about 300 milliliters of milky yellow fluid. Later testing revealed that it was made of glutamic acid substances created during a rudimentary fermentation process involving honey, berries, grapes, and rice. It probably tastes a little bit like rice wine. Drinking it for pleasure might not have been the point, though. 2,200 years ago, alcohol was used as medicine as much as it was used for merriment, hence the old saying, "Let's drink to health." For many years, the mummified remains of Gebeline Man in the early Egypt gallery of the British Museum were known by historians and archaeologists as one of the world's best preserved, non-deliberate mummies. He was buried in a shallow grave in Gebeline, just south of Thebes, about 5,500 years ago, wrapped in matting and linen, with no effort made to preserve his remains. Nevertheless, the hot sand and the sun preserved him anyway, much to the shock of the archaeologists who discovered him in 1896. His cause of death was unknown from then until 2013, when 3D imaging proved beyond all reasonable doubt that this unfortunate man was fatally stabbed in the back. The same scans also proved that he was young, probably no more than 20 years old when his life came to an end. Eager to find out more, the scientists at the museum subjected the mummy to infrared testing in 2018 and made another shocking discovery. Back when he was alive, his skin was covered in animal tattoos, making his the oldest figural tattoos ever discovered in the world. The discovery prompted experts at the museum to examine another mummy in their collection, a female mummy known as Gebeline Woman, and they found similar tattoos on her. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!